know you've all been waiting to find out how the Anthem AVM70 compares to the Marantz AV7706, and today we're going to find out. We're going to talk about some of my likes and dislikes of both. We're also going to talk about how the audio compares and give some demos as well, but as usual, that comes with a disclaimer. So make sure you guys stick around. This is going to be very informative. I'm Barrett, this is Spec Tech. Welcome to the channel. I recently unboxed the Anthem AVM70, and in that video I gave you some of my first impressions as well as some of the things I liked and some of the things I did not like. I also discussed some of the issues that I was having with that unit. If you guys didn't catch that video, I'll link it in the top right hand corner as well as down in the description below. But in that video I promised I would compare my Marantz AV7706 to the Anthem AVM70 to see which one sounds better. But I also want to know what you guys think, so make sure you drop your comments down below. Maybe you've had both these units and heard them both. Which one did you guys prefer? But real quick before we get into all that, I do need to point out that the price is not equal on these two units. The Marantz is priced at $25.99 USD and the Anthem is priced at $34.99 USD. I was really hoping that Anthem would get their room correction software ARC figured out for this video, but unfortunately I don't think it's quite sorted out just yet. There is a beta released right now, but I did use that beta and it didn't get my trim levels even close to right. I'm talking they were way off, so I didn't want to trust the rest of the software that it was accurate when it couldn't even get the trims right. So I know that Anthem is working on it and hopefully they do have a fully working version out soon. But unfortunately for this video, we will not be comparing room correction softwares here. We are going to compare the sounds of the unit without their room correction softwares enabled. I actually feel like this is a good way of doing it because you're going to find out what these units are capable of without the help of their room correction software, because everybody has their favorite room correction software. Some may like Odyssey, some may like ARC, some like Dirac. But in this case, you're just going to find out what these units are capable of without any EQing. For the demos later on in the video, as well as for all of my listening sessions, the speakers were set up exactly the same and the source material was identical as well. I will have all of the distances set exactly the same in the Marantz as well as the Anthem unit, and I will have them gain matched to 75 dB at the main listening position, and I used the SPL meter in my Roux software along with the UMIC 1 to get these accurate measurements. One important thing to note here is that Anthem does not allow you to change the master volume once the test tones are engaged, whereas Marantz does. So to set the 75 dB for the Marantz, what you want to do is change the master volume to 0 dB and then play the test tones and adjust the trims so that it has 75 dB at the main listening position. But one thing that I noticed is that the Anthem sounded quite a bit louder after I had gain matched them to 75 dB because the Anthem didn't allow me to change the volume. I was assuming that they were using reference volume of 0 dB. Because I was suspicious that the Anthem was playing quite a bit louder than the Marantz, what I did is I took a 200 Hz sine wave and I played it at negative 20 dB master volume on both of the units, and then I measured it with the SPL meter in Roux, and I found that the Anthem was actually playing 6.7 dBs louder than the Marantz unit. So when you see the demos later on, I have adjusted the volume to account for that 6.7 dB. So if you do notice that the volumes are different, that's exactly why. Of course, we want to know how Anthem and Marantz handle the bass department. So for all of my listening sessions, as well as the demos later on in this video, both of my subwoofers are enabled, but I do want to let you know that they are not gain matched for 75 dB. At the main listening position, I like to run my subwoofers about 8 decibels hot. So with all of those parameters laid out, that should keep things on par and fair for both of these units. So today we're going to strictly talk about the audio, the interface differences, as well as the design differences of these two units. Before we get into the audio comparison, let's talk about some of the physical differences of these units, as well as some of my likes and dislikes for the user interface and the design of them. So we might as well start off with some of the major differences between these units, one of them being that the Marantz is an 11.2 channel processor and the Anthem AVM70 is a 15.2 channel processor, so you have 4 more channels with the Anthem. Marantz did decide to keep some of the legacy video inputs like RCA and component, whereas Anthem has HDMI inputs only. And when it comes to HDMIs, we all know that Marantz decided to go with HDMI 2.1, whereas Anthem decided to stick with HDMI 2.0 with the hardware upgrade in the future if you do want to change to HDMI 2.1 once they get that all sorted out. Let's touch really quickly on the remotes as well. One thing I was happy to see is that both the Anthem and Marantz remotes are backlit. I mean, it is very helpful for a dark theater room. Really, companies should be doing this with all of their AVR and processor remotes, but at least in these two cases, they are backlit. Another thing I noticed about the Anthem remote is that it has a slightly grippy, soft touch feel to the remote, which actually helps you hold onto it. One of the benefits of the Marantz remote over the Anthem, though, is that it does have quick select buttons for your source. So if you want to choose Blu-ray, it's just one button press. If you want to switch to your Xbox, again, just one button press. Whereas the Anthem, you do have to cycle through them and then press OK on the one that you want. So that's enough about the remotes. Let's talk about the processors themselves and their designs. Both of them are well built, both of them seem quite sturdy, and it's going to come down to your personal preference which looks you like better. For me personally, I truly do like the design of both of these units, although I do tend to lean towards the Anthem AVM70. It just does look a little bit more modern and a little bit more sleek, so for me personally, I choose the looks of the Anthem AVM70. I really do like the minimalist front panel of the AVM70, although I do feel like they didn't utilize the digital display as well as they could have. I'm hoping in the future with firmware updates that they do offer some customization so you can kind of choose what you do and do not see on there. Although I noticed recently, which I think is an update, is that when you are switching songs on Bluetooth, it actually shows what song you're switching to on the front display. I didn't notice that in the beginning when I first set up the unit, so I'm thinking that's something new, which is promising. It's looking like they're learning to optimize that screen a little bit more for us. One of the downsides to this display, though, is that everything is fairly small except for the volume, so unless you're sitting fairly close or you have really good vision, you're not going to be able to see the other information that it's displaying anyway. So this is why I want them to add some customization options to the front display, because maybe you don't want the volume to be so large. You can have the volume in smaller font in the top left-hand corner and have some other information displayed in larger font in the center, and so on. I just hope that they implement something like that in the future. All that being said, though, it is still a much better option than the porthole display on the Marantz, which is too small really to see anything. There is a larger display behind the flip cover on the Marantz if you flip it down, but then you're losing that minimalist look on the front panel to open that to see the screen. So for me personally, I always just use the on-screen display to find out information on the Marantz. I never really use the front displays at all. Before we move on to the user interface and the on-screen displays, if you guys are into audio and home theater, please consider subscribing because that's what I'm all about. And if you subscribe, you might as well click the bell icon so that you can be notified about my future videos. And if you could take just 1 second out of your day to click that like button down below, it really takes you no time at all, but I really do appreciate it. Alright, so let's move on to the user interface as well as the on-screen display, which from now on I'll just refer to it as the OSD. The interface on the Anthem can be seen on the OSD as well as on the front display. It is a simple list-based interface with no graphics, except for when you're scrolling through the input source, you will see some graphics on the front display. The OSD is quite simple and dated on the Anthem, but I'm still happy that they decided to include it. The Marantz does have a simple list-based interface on the front panel, but it has a little bit more of a polished OSD. But even the Marantz OSD is a little bit dated and could use an update. One of the benefits, though, of the simple OSD on the Anthem is that it is quite speedy. I've never had a complaint about the Marantz speed of the OSD, but because it does have some graphics and it is a little bit more polished, it isn't quite as fast as the Anthem's OSD. Both of these units do provide some output information on their OSD when you press the information button on the remote, except for the Marantz does show you quite a bit more useful information. The OSD on the Marantz will show you detailed input and output information, which is really helpful if you want to make sure that everything is being processed and displayed properly. But on the other hand, the Anthem does have the Web UI, which is something that the Marantz does not have. It is very well laid out, very intuitive, and so far it's worked very well for me. I did have one glitch though where I had made some changes to the subwoofers and then both subwoofers would not engage, so I had to turn the unit off and turn the unit back on, and that rectified the problem. While we're on the subject of glitches, I did want to point out that I had not experienced any glitches with the Marantz other than the already identified HDMI 2.1 issues before this comparison, but of course, as fate would have it, during this comparison, the Marantz did experience some handshake issues with the NVIDIA Shield, which did cause a problem for about 2 or 3 minutes, and then it seemed to fix itself. But other than that one handshake issue, the Marantz has worked pretty much flawlessly. Unfortunately, I can't say the same thing for Anthem. Sometimes when you're switching sound modes on the Anthem, it will get hung up and take a little bit of time before it starts playing audio again, and other times it just won't play any audio at all when you switch the sound mode, so then you have to switch to a different sound mode and then back to the one that wasn't playing any audio, and that usually fixes the problem. Another bug that I noticed is that the system sounds on the NVIDIA Shield are inconsistent. So you know when you're scrolling through the menu and you're entering and exiting apps, you're getting that clicking and the clacking. Well, sometimes the Anthem just won't play any sound whatsoever, so you're scrolling through the NVIDIA Shield silently, and then all of a sudden it'll start playing the clicks and clacks, and then you'll enter an app and exit the app, and then again you won't be getting any system sounds. So it's very inconsistent. I'm sure it can be fixed with an update in the future though. This of course isn't a huge issue or a deal breaker, but it is annoying nonetheless. So we've touched on the sound modes. Now let's discuss on how these units differ in how they handle sound profiles and presets. So the Marantz does offer 2 different presets, which allows you to have different sound settings for each one, including different Odyssey settings. So if you wanted to have one set up specifically for movies, you could do that, and then have another one set up for music, and it is really easy to switch between these two presets using the remote. In addition to that, the Marantz does offer customizable settings for 2-channel listening, which is completely separate from surround modes. This is something that I actually found I used quite a bit, so when I was listening to music, I would always use 2-channel mode because I could have it set up to how I like music versus how I like everything else being played through the Marantz. The Anthem handles this a little bit differently, but also in a very useful way. So they provide you with 4 different profiles that you can set up individually. You then have to choose which sound profile you want for each input. So for example, if I wanted to set one up specifically for gaming, I could set up profile 1 for gaming and then have that set for my Xbox One input. And then if I wanted one for music, I could set one up profile 2 specifically for music and then have that applied to, say, the Bluetooth input. And then if I wanted one for movies, I could set profile 3 specifically for movies and have that one set to my Blu-ray player or HDMI 3, for example. And in addition to that, you can actually choose if the input is going to be using the Anthem room correction or not, so you can enable it or disable it depending on the input. But as you can see, they are both very flexible on how they handle their sound profiles and presets. You could even argue that the Anthem is a little bit more flexible by offering 4 profiles, whereas the Marantz only offers 2 profiles, as well as the 2-channel settings. So it's really going to come down to personal preference which one you like. For me personally though, I do tend to lean a little bit more to the Marantz because of that 2-channel setting. That way you can use it for any source input. So if you're listening to a CD on your Blu-ray player, you can easily turn it to your 2-channel settings. And then if you want to switch to Bluetooth music, you can easily again switch to your 2-channel settings. Whereas with the Anthem, you would have to change the sound profile. So again, it can be done. It just takes a little bit more time and maybe a little less convenient. All right guys, so that pretty much covers the differences that I've noticed so far between using these two units, between their design, their OSD, and their user interface. And it's really going to come down to your personal preference, which one you like better. For me personally, I do like the Anthem better, of course, other than the bugs that I've been experiencing, but I'm assuming they're going to fix those with firmware updates in the near future. But with all that being said, I do want to send a little message here to Anthem. I mean, most of these bugs should have been figured out before you release this unit, especially with ARC not working. In my opinion, that's a pretty big ball drop. So I'm hoping with future releases, you guys have things a little bit better figured out before you release your units. Alright guys, we've all waited long enough. Let's get into how these things sound, because that's what really matters. So I will be doing some demos here and switching back and forth. So when it is the Anthem audio, it will be lit up in red LED lights, and when it is the Marantz audio, it will be lit up in blue LED lights. I will be doing a movie demo, a couple songs, and a Dolby Atmos demo, and I will be giving you guys some of my initial thoughts on that specific demo in between, and then after all of the demos have played, we'll get into more detail on how these things sound. And as usual with the demos, there is a disclaimer, and that is that my recording equipment, my room, as well as the device that you're listening on, will not give you an accurate depiction of what I'm hearing in my room. In addition to that, my recording equipment does not pick up multi-channel audio, so I will be playing a Dolby Atmos as well as a movie. And you won't be able to tell that there's Atmos going on in the room. So keep that in mind when you're listening to these demos. Yes, you may be able to hear some differences between the two, but again, that won't be an accurate depiction of what I was hearing in my room. And real quick, I also want to point out that my mic does pick up bass more than it picks up the rest of the sounds, so it does sound like it is boomy on the recordings, but that is not how it sounded in my room. So first of all, I will be playing these demos with everything gain matched to 75 dB at the MLP. So keep in mind, as I stated earlier, that the Anthem does play 6.7 dB hot, so the volumes will be different there, but it is gain matched. Alright guys, let's get into the first demo. So the first demo here is being played on a Blu-ray from my Panasonic UB820, and it is John Wick. It's the bar gunfight scene. Alright, so some of my impressions on this one is I did notice that the gunshots were a lot more punchy and a little bit more dynamic with the Anthem, and I did notice that the glass breaking was also more clear on the Anthem versus the Marantz. The Marantz did seem to have a little bit more bass in this scene, and even though it does have great clarity, it did seem to be a little bit more muffled than the Anthem for the scene. So for the John Wick demo, clarity, dynamics, and sound quality, I have to give it to the Anthem here. Let's see how these units both handle music. So here's a copyright-free song called Gentleman by J2X and Lou from Amazon Music HD. So in this song, the Marantz does seem to be a little bit more bass heavy again, but after listening to the recording, it does sound like it's a little bit boomy on the recording, but I want to remind you guys that's not what it sounded like in my room. The Marantz really did sound fantastic, and it was not boomy with the bass in my room. So both of these units really did perform very well with the music. You can't really complain about either of them, but again, clarity and balance does seem to lean towards the Anthem, so again, I gotta give the point to Anthem here. This next one is a Dolby demo in True HD. It's called Dolby Atmosphere, and I will be using the NVIDIA Shield with the VLC player for this one. And it has a lot of good height effects, so in my room it is going to help me determine which one handles channel separation between the floor speakers and the height channels a little bit better. But of course, that's not going to portray very well over my camera, so don't expect to hear what I'm hearing in my room. All right, guys, let's get into this next one. So with this demo, it was a little bit more difficult to hear the differences, but the differences still were there. So the Anthem does seem to add a little bit more clarity and maybe a little bit more fullness to the music notes, and it does have a little bit more of a balanced sound as well. So of course the Marantz performed very well here with this demo. I don't want you guys to think that the differences here are just monumental or they're just really big differences. They are noticeable because I can compare them side by side, but they're not as big as one might think, but they are there. So a good way to put it would be that the Anthem provides directional audio and height audio more effortlessly. Like it just sounds like it's just a little bit more in pretty much all aspects versus the Marantz. But again, that's not to put the Marantz down. It did do a fantastic job and it still sounds fantastic. You can still tell where the sounds are coming from and whatnot. It's just that the Anthem seems to do it just a little bit better. Alright guys, so let's try one more song. And this song is called Savage by Nefix, and it is on Amazon Music HD.
If I stay where you stay, if I go where you go, if I pay where you play, do you know what I know? Do you love, do you hate, do you care what I say? Is it all just the same? Always make these mistakes. So baby, take me, let me, all I wanna do is...
So again with this song guys, it was a little bit more difficult to point out the differences, but of course the differences are still there. Both units did sound fantastic here, but one thing I want to point out is that stock Marantz does seem to have a little bit more bass. Of course you could easily correct that by turning it down on the internal settings, but that's not what this video is about. I was here to show you guys what the stock sound sounds like and compare the two. So of course if you wanted the bass to be tamed down on the Marantz, you could easily do that. If you wanted to turn the bass up on the Anthem, you could easily do that. But the Anthem for stock sound does seem to be a little bit more well balanced. But as far as clarity goes and channel separation goes, that isn't something that you can go and tweak a setting, other than I guess turning up that channel if you want to hear that channel a little bit more, channel separation. But as far as stock settings go, the Anthem does have a little bit better channel separation and a little bit more clarity. So for instance, in this song in particular, when you hear that clicking sound, almost like somebody's turning a dial, that click, 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 that sound itself is where I noticed the differences on the Anthem the most. It just seemed to be a little bit more clear, a little bit more dynamic. It stood out from the song a little bit better than with the Marantz. I think a good way to put it is there's a really thin veil in front of the Marantz sound versus the Anthem. So I don't want you guys to think that, oh, it's muffled and it's not that bad. But there does seem to be a little bit of a veil in front of the Marantz versus the Anthem. And then when you, of course, play the Anthem, it's like lifting that veil out of the way, and everything is just a little bit more. Alright guys, I'm sorry to say, but now the demos are over, so let's discuss overall the sound between the Marantz and the Anthem. So first of all, again, I want to point out that both of these units sound fantastic, and I also want to point out that when I got the Marantz, I was switching from the Denon AVR X4400, I got the Marantz AV7706, and I would say that that difference was night and day. The Marantz had much better channel separation, much better clarity over the Denon. It was noticeable instantly after plugging in the Marantz that it was better. That isn't something that I experienced between the Marantz and the Anthem. It's not like I plugged the Anthem in and instantly I was like, oh yeah, this is better. This is way better. It wasn't like that. I had to compare them side by side and switch back and forth to be able to point out those differences, but they are noticeable and they are there. The Anthem does sound a little bit better, a little bit clearer, a little bit more balanced, and a little bit more dynamic. So just to give a little bit more clarity on the bass situation, I kept pointing out that the Marantz seemed a little bit more bass heavy and the Anthem seemed a little bit more tamed down, but neither of them were lacking. I don't want you to take it that the Anthem was lacking and the Marantz had just enough or too much. Neither of them were lacking. They both sounded good. It's just the Marantz seems to step it up just a little bit in the bass department. But again, keep in mind that there was no room calibration to tame down the subwoofers, but thanks to Cody at Harbottle Audio, I do have specific room tunes for my subwoofers, for my room specifically, so there was still some EQing done on the subwoofer aspect of things within the DSP on the subwoofers themselves. But again, as previously mentioned, you can adjust the bass very easily within the units, so if you wanted more or less, you could easily change that. So this isn't really a pro or a con for either unit as far as bass goes, because it can be adjusted so simply. It's just that they do handle it a little bit differently with their stock sound. Alright, so let's get into the highs and the mid-range. Again, both units do sound fantastic with the highs and the mid-range. You wouldn't really be disappointed with either of them. It's not like either of them are lacking in any way, shape, or form. But again, this is a video about comparison, so I do need to try and be a little bit nitpicky here and give you guys what the differences are. So when it comes to the Marantz, I would say that it has a slightly more warm presentation for, especially for music. It does seem to be a little bit on the warm side, but still very close to neutral, I would say, whereas the Anthem is definitely, I would say, more on the neutral side of things. It seems to be very well balanced as far as its sound characteristics go. But at the same time, it is a little bit more clear with its highs and its mid-range. So I guess when it comes to channel separation and clarity, that is where things are a little bit more noticeable between these two units. But as I stated earlier, when I switched from the Denon to the Marantz kind of stood head and shoulders above the Denon as far as channel separation and clarity. The Anthem definitely doesn't do that with the Marantz. It's not head and shoulders above it, but it takes what the Marantz does and just improves upon it a little bit, gives you a little bit more clarity, a little bit better channel separation, and just a little bit overall better presentation as far as what I could tell from my listening sessions as well as the demos that we did here. Another thing I would like to point out is that the Anthem does seem to do dynamics just a little bit better than the Marantz as well, and this was especially noticeable when I was doing the John Wick demo. The gunshots were definitely more dynamic. They seemed to be a little bit tamed with the Marantz. Again, that veil situation that I stated earlier, it just seemed to be a little bit more muffled, and I don't want you guys to take that and be like, oh, the Marantz is muffled. That's not what I'm trying to say here. It's just a little bit less than what the Anthem was. The gunshots just had a bit more of a punch, a little bit more of a dynamic sound to them versus the Marantz. So that pretty much sums up the sound, guys. So what it comes down to is which one you would prefer or which one I would prefer. So of course I am going to tell you guys which one I am going to choose, either the Marantz or the Anthem. But real quick before I get into that, please consider subscribing to the channel, click the bell icon so that you can be notified about my future videos, and please take just 1 second to click the like button down below. It takes no time at all, but I really appreciate it. Alright guys, I don't think it's going to come as any surprise which one I decided to keep based on the theme of this video. Like I said, the Anthem just seems to do a little bit more in all those categories: channel separation, clarity, and dynamics. Like I said, the Marantz stood head and shoulders over the Denon, and then the Anthem took what the Marantz did and just improved upon it a little bit in all those aspects. So sound-wise, I would say it is better than the Marantz. So that is the one that I decided to keep. So for me, the Anthem is the winner, but that doesn't mean it has to be the winner for all of you. It's going to come down to personal preference. For instance, if you do need RCA video inputs or component inputs, that's something the Marantz has over the Anthem. It is also about $900 US cheaper than the Anthem, so if budget's a big deal to you, then you may want to look at the Marantz over the Anthem. You're still not going to have any complaints. You're still going to be very happy with the performance of the Marantz. So if there's anybody out there interested in a Marantz AV7706, I know that processors are still difficult to find on the market. You will see mine up on the market very shortly. Make sure that you do stay tuned on the channel. I have some very cool content coming. And remember to enjoy your systems. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.